Mark Harris had always loved quiet places. As a wildlife photographer, he spent more time outdoors than inside any city building. That summer, he planned a long trip across the Southwest deserts, hoping to capture rare photos of wild horses, red rock cliffs glowing under the sun, and the endless blue sky stretched over the land. Arizona, especially the areas close to old Apache territory, offered all the beauty he hoped for. The desert was peaceful, almost like a different world. The air smelled of warm sand and sagebrush, and the wind carried the soft sounds of distant birds. Mark enjoyed every moment of it. He had rented a small cabin at the edge of the desert. It was simple but comfortable, just a bed, a table, a tiny kitchen, and a porch where he could sit at night and watch the stars. The cabin stood far from busy roads, which was perfect for him. He wanted to work in silence, where nothing disturbed his focus. He always said that the desert spoke its own quiet language, and if you listened closely enough, you could hear it. On the evening, everything changed. Mark left his cabin just before sunset, carrying his camera and a bottle of water. The sky was orange and pink, and the rocks around him glowed as if they were lit from inside. He walked slowly, stopping every few minutes to take photos. His goal was to find a high point on the rocky hills where he could capture the sunset in all its glory. As he walked farther, the desert began to cool. The heat of the day slid away, replaced by a gentle breeze. Mark felt relaxed, taking his time, letting his eyes wander over the landscape. He often said the desert looked empty at first, but if you paid attention, you saw how full it truly was. Tiny lizards running across the sand, hawks gliding above, and small flowers blooming between rocks. He had been walking for nearly an hour when something unusual caught his attention. At first, he thought it was just another shadow between the rocks, but when he looked more closely, the shape did not move. The form seemed too still, too human. About 10 feet away, he realized it was a woman. She lay on her side near a large boulder, her dark hair spread across the ground like a blanket. Her clothes were dusty, and one of her boots looked worn. She did not move, even when Mark approached. Her breathing was slow, almost too shallow to see. She looked exhausted, as if she had been walking for a long time under the hot sun. Mark froze for a moment. He had never found anyone out here before. The desert was wide, and people rarely wandered this far from the marked paths. He lowered himself beside her carefully. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Can you hear me? Can 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 you hear me?" There was no answer. Her eyelids did not lift. Mark gently touched her arm, not hard, just enough to check if she reacted. Still nothing. He tried again, this time speaking a little louder. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can you open your eyes?" She did not wake. Mark felt a wave of worry wash over him. The desert could be harsh during the day, and she might have been here for hours. She needed help. The nearest town was too far to reach on foot before nightfall, and the temperature would drop quickly once the sun disappeared. Leaving her alone was not an option. He glanced around, thinking through his options. His cabin was about a 20-minute walk from here, close enough to carry her without risking too much time. It was the only safe place nearby, with water, shade, and warmth. He removed his backpack and placed it under her head to lift it gently. She still did not respond. Mark took a slow breath and carefully slipped his arms under her shoulders and knees. She was light, but carrying another person across uneven ground was not easy. Still, he held her securely, determined not to let her slip even once. He walked slowly, step by step, keeping his eyes fixed on the cabin in the distance. The sun dipped lower while he walked, painting the ground in long gold lines. Mark's breath grew heavier, but he kept going. He checked her face several times to make sure she was still breathing. Her expression remained calm, not scared, almost peaceful. It made him want even more, to make sure she was safe. When he finally reached the cabin, he pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. He carried her to the bed and laid her down gently. Her skin felt cool, which worried him. He hurried to get a blanket, covering her to help her stay warm. Then, he brought a glass of water and placed it beside the bed for when she woke. The next step was to check her for any visible injuries. He did not touch her more than necessary, but he needed to make sure she wasn't hurt. Her arms and legs seemed fine, just dusty and a bit scratched, likely from walking through brush. The main issue seemed to be exhaustion and dehydration. Mark sat on the chair beside the bed, watching her carefully. He did not want to fall asleep, but after a long day in the sun, his own energy was fading. Still, he stayed awake long enough to make sure her breathing became steadier. Slowly, she seemed to relax, her chest rising and falling more evenly. As the night deepened, Mark listened to the desert outside. The wind brushed against the cabin walls. A distant owl called through the darkness. He felt a mix of concern and curiosity. Who was this woman? How had she ended up alone in the desert? Was she lost? Or had something else happened? After a while, his eyelids grew heavy. He checked her one last time. She was resting peacefully now, wrapped in the blanket, breathing softly. Relieved, he leaned back in his chair. He told himself he would just close his eyes for a few minutes, just enough to regain some strength. But the desert night was calm, and exhaustion settled over him like a quiet wave. Before he knew it, he drifted into sleep. It was early morning when light began to slip through the cabin window. The sky outside turned pale blue, and the shadows on the floor shortened. Mark shifted in his sleep, unaware that something unexpected was happening only a few feet away. The woman, who had been motionless the night before, began to stir. Her fingers twitched lightly. Her head turned slightly on the pillow. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft morning light. For several seconds, she lay quietly, looking around the small room. Her gaze moved from the wooden ceiling to the plain walls to the small table near the bed. Then her eyes settled on Mark, who was still asleep in the chair beside her. She watched him calmly, studying his face with a look that was neither frightened nor confused, more like she was quietly trying to understand where she was and why. By the time Mark began to wake, the morning light filled the room. He stretched slightly, feeling the stiffness in his neck from sleeping in the chair. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting to see the woman still resting peacefully. But instead, he saw her sitting upright on the bed, awake and staring at him with deep, steady eyes. Her sudden alertness made him blink in surprise. For a second, he could not speak. She looked calm, but serious, almost as if she had been waiting for him to wake. In that quiet morning moment, Mark felt as if time had paused. He had rescued her the night before. But now, seeing her awake and studying him so closely, he realized the situation was far more unusual and possibly far more important than he had expected. Mark blinked twice, unsure if he was dreaming at first. The woman he had carried through the desert the night before was now wide awake, sitting upright on his bed and quietly watching him. Her dark eyes were steady and calm, almost too calm for someone who had been unconscious just hours earlier. For a moment, the room felt unusually still. The morning sunlight came through the window in soft lines, spreading across the floor, touching her face gently. Her expression did not show fear. If anything, she looked thoughtful, like someone trying to understand the person sitting in front of her. Mark cleared his throat politely. "Good morning," he said in a gentle voice. He wanted to sound calm, even though he felt surprise deep inside. "How are you feeling?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a slow breath, as if trying to gather her thoughts before speaking. Then she said softly, "I am better." Her voice was smooth but slightly raspy, as though she hadn't spoken in a while. She looked around the small cabin again, before her eyes returned to Mark. You brought me here, she said quietly. It was a statement, calm, aware. Yes, Mark replied, nodding. I found you near the rocks yesterday evening. You weren't awake. I thought you needed help. She lowered her gaze for a moment, as if reflecting on something. Then, she looked up again and said, Thank you. Mark relaxed a little. I'm glad you're okay. I was worried. The woman studied him for another few seconds, her expression unreadable, but not unfriendly. Then, she lifted her hand slightly, pointing at the glass of water on the table. Mark quickly stood up and handed it to her. She accepted it with gentle hands, sipping slowly, as though each drop meant something important. My name is Mark, he said, hoping to make her feel safe. Mark Harris. She didn't look surprised by his introduction. Instead, she lowered the glass and said, Tala. Mark smiled softly. The name suited her. Well, calm, grounded, like the desert she came from. It's nice to meet you, Tala, he said kindly. Do you remember what happened before I found you? She didn't answer right away. She looked at the blanket on her lap, then toward the window, where the sky was turning brighter by the minute. It was a long day, she said finally. Too long. Her tone said there was more to the story. But she wasn't ready to explain everything yet. Mark didn't push. He knew that when someone woke up in a stranger's cabin after a difficult night, they needed time. I didn't want to move you too much, he said gently. I wasn't sure how hurt you were. You were breathing, but very lightly. I just wanted to keep you safe. Tala nodded slowly. You chose kindness. Mark shrugged humbly. I just did what anyone would do. But she shook her head. Not everyone would. Her words were simple. But something about the way she said them made Mark feel a quiet pressure in his chest. Not fear, but something like humility. Tala's eyes held a wisdom he couldn't explain yet, as if she had seen many things in her life and judged people not by their words but by their actions. He pulled the chair a little farther from the bed to give her space. You're welcome to rest longer if you need to, he said. You must be tired. She looked down at her hands, then around the room again. I woke up early, she said softly. I saw you sleeping there. She nodded toward the chair. You stayed all night. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Tala's eyes softened for a moment, and Mark sensed a quiet appreciation there, though she didn't say it aloud. After a small pause, she said quietly, You look familiar. Mark raised an eyebrow slightly. Familiar? Have we met before? No, she said. Not you, but someone who looks like you. This confused him. But before he could ask, Tala gently touched her forehead, as if she were trying to remember something clearly. My father, she murmured. He had a picture, a very old one. The man in the picture looked like you. Mark blinked. Are you sure? My family isn't from around here. Tala tilted her head thoughtfully. Maybe not. But I remember the photograph well. It was old, worn, and kept in a small wooden box. My father never showed it to anyone except me. He said it mattered. Mark struggled to make sense of her words. What kind of picture was it? Do you know the man's name? Tala shook her head gently. Only that the man helped him when he was young. My father spoke of him with respect. Mark looked down at his hands. His grandfather used to travel a lot in his younger days working on ranches, helping with outdoor projects, and spending years around the Southwest. Could there be a connection? It sounded impossible. Yet something inside him whispered otherwise. Maybe it was my grandfather, Mark said quietly. He did travel through these regions many years ago. Tala looked at him with a steady gaze. Maybe, she said. There is history in faces. As she said this, Mark felt a strange but comforting feeling settle over him. He didn't know why, But her words seemed to connect their meeting to something bigger, something beyond simple coincidence. Tala placed her hands on her lap, breathing slowly. Her expression shifted slightly, showing the first hint of fatigue. "Are you still feeling weak?" Mark asked. "A little," she replied. "But I am awake, and my mind is clear." "That's good," he said. "If you need something to eat, I can make something simple." She nodded politely. "Thank you." Mark moved to the small kitchen area, keeping an eye on her in case she felt dizzy or confused. But Tala sat quietly, looking calm and centered. She watched the room with the same steady alertness she had shown when he first woke. He prepared a small breakfast bread, fruit, and warm tea. When he brought it to her, she accepted the plate carefully. "You don't need to rush," he said. "Eat slowly. You've been through a lot." Tala ate a little, then set the plate on her lap. "Just for the season," Mark replied. "I'm here for photography. The desert is a good place for my work." Tala nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Yes," she said. "This land has stories. If you look through a lens long enough, you will see them." Her words were poetic, almost like a message wrapped inside another message. Mark smiled softly. "You speak like someone who knows the land well." "The land as well. No sin, no card, entende. I do," she said calmly. "I grew up close to this place. My family has lived here for generations. Actually, end quote. Comment clam, end quote." "That's amazing," Mark replied. "I've always admired how deeply connected native communities are to the land." Tala looked at him with a thoughtful gaze. "The land remembers everything," she said. "Even the actions of people who walked here long ago." Mark felt a tiny shiver, not from fear, but from the quiet mystery in her tone. "What were you doing out there yesterday?" he finally asked, gently. "Were you lost?" Tala looked down again, her fingers tightening slightly around the blanket. "I was not lost," she said softly. "I was leaving something behind, or trying to." Her answer was honest, but not complete. There was a deeper story she wasn't ready to share, not yet. And then the heat became too strong. She continued quietly. "I walked too long without enough water. My body grew tired." Mark nodded slowly. "You could have been in real danger." She looked straight at him. "And yet, I woke up here." The way she said it carried meaning beyond the simple words. It sounded almost like she believed their meeting had a purpose. Mark hesitated, then said, "I'm just glad I was there when you needed someone." Tala studied him again with that calm, observing gaze. "You were meant to be there," she said gently. "I feel that." Mark didn't know what to say. The room grew still again, filled with warm light and quiet understanding. Something invisible but meaningful seemed to be forming between them, a connection that neither of them fully understood yet. As the morning moved on, Tala slowly began to regain her strength. She sat straighter, her eyes brighter now, her breathing more relaxed. She seemed to be preparing herself not to leave immediately, but to finally share the truth of why she had been alone in the desert. And Mark sensed that whatever she was about to reveal would change the way he understood their meeting, and perhaps even his own past. The morning sun had climbed higher, filling the cabin with a warm and gentle glow. Tala sat quietly on the bed, her hands resting softly on her lap. Though she seemed calm, Mark sensed something shifting inside her, like she was preparing herself to open a door she had kept closed for a long time. Mark didn't push her. He simply sat back in his chair, giving her the slow, patient silence she needed. He had learned that some truths came out only when the person felt safe enough to speak them. After a few minutes, Tala inhaled deeply and looked up at him. "There is something I must tell you," she said softly. "Something that explains why I was out there alone, and why seeing you this morning felt familiar." Mark's curiosity stirred gently. "You can tell me whatever you want," he said, with calm sincerity. I'm here to listen. Tala nodded, as if she had expected that response. She straightened her shoulders a little, gathering strength. My family has lived in this region for many generations, she began. My father used to say that our stories were tied to the land. He believed that memories, even old ones, stay in the earth and air. Mark listened closely. Her voice carried both warmth and sadness. For many years, she continued, my father kept a small wooden box hidden in his room. He said it held pieces of our past. When I was a child, he allowed me to see what was inside. But only once. She paused, her fingers brushing the blanket, as though touching something invisible. I remember opening that box very carefully, she said softly. Inside it were a few beads from an old necklace, a feather wrapped in cloth, a tiny book with worn pages, and a photograph. She looked up at Mark, her eyes holding the memory clearly. It was a very old picture, she said. The kind taken long before I was born. The corners were bent, and the edges had turned brown. In the picture stood two people, my father when he was young, and a man he described as a traveler who helped at the right time. A gentle surprise rose inside Mark. A traveler? Yes, Tala replied. My father said this man appeared during a time when the land had been difficult, and he helped with simple things, sharing food, carrying supplies, guiding people to water when they needed it. Small actions, but they stayed in my father's heart. Mark felt a slight hum of connection. Did he ever mention the man's name? No, Tala said quietly. He only said that kindness does not always need a name. He believed the man's actions were what mattered most. But I remember the man's face in the picture. His features, his eyes, they looked like yours. Mark's breath caught for a moment. Like me? Yes, she said. When I woke up and saw you sitting in the chair, my mind went back to that photograph. At first I thought I was still dreaming, but the more I looked, the more certain I became. Mark sat in stillness, absorbing her words. His grandfather had traveled widely in the Southwest as a young man, often speaking of the people he met, but never naming them. Could he have been the traveler in the old photograph? The possibility felt both strange and meaningful. My grandfather used to wander these lands, Mark said after a moment. He loved the desert and always tried to help people he met. He told me stories when I was a child, though not many details. He said the world was kinder when strangers looked after one another. Tala's eyes softened. Then, perhaps the man in the picture was him. A quiet warmth filled the room. Mark felt something like a thread connecting the past to the present, stretching across years, places, and lives. You said you were leaving something behind yesterday, Mark said gently. Something important. Was it connected to your father? Tala looked down, her face thoughtful and calm. Yes, she said quietly. My father passed away several months ago. He left many things to me, but the most important was his belief that every person must learn when to hold on and when to let go. Mark remained silent, waiting. For many years, Tala continued, my family protected a piece of land that held great meaning to us. My father always said it must be cared for with respect. But recently, there were disagreements between some people in the community. They wanted to use the land in ways my father didn't approve of. Her voice remained peaceful, not angry. She wasn't speaking of conflict, but of concern and confusion. The natural disagreements that sometimes happen when people value things differently. When my father passed, I felt responsible to make the right choices, she said. But I didn't know what the right choices were. I felt lost, overwhelmed by expectation, unsure of how to honor everything correctly. Her fingers tightened slightly around the blanket, the only sign of her inner struggle. I walked into the desert yesterday to clear my thoughts, she said. To breathe. To feel the earth the way my father used to. I wanted to understand what it meant to let go, and what it meant to keep something safe. Mark nodded slowly. He understood how heavy such decisions could be, even when they came from love. I walked for a long time, Tala said. Too long. The sun grew stronger. The ground felt hotter with each step. I told myself I could make it to the next ridge, but my strength faded. I should have turned back sooner. But I felt drawn forward, as if something unseen was guiding me. She looked at Mark again, her eyes deep with meaning. When I finally fell, I remember thinking I would wake when I was meant to. And then, I opened my eyes here. Axteen, end raise. Axteen, end work. Mark swallowed gently. Her story carried a quiet beauty, filled with emotion, but no anger. She had not been running from anyone, she had been seeking clarity, searching for a moment of peace. You said you felt drawn forward, Mark said. Do you think something was leading you? Tala nodded. Yes. I believe the land speaks in quiet ways. My father always said that sometimes answers come in forms we do not expect. And you think, I was one of those forms? She smiled softly. I think kindness repeats itself across generations. Your grandfather helped my father long ago. And then, without knowing, you helped me. Her words filled the room like gentle sunlight. Mark felt humbled, touched by the idea that a simple act carrying a stranger to safety could be part of something much larger. I didn't know any of this, he said quietly. I just saw someone who needed help. Tala nodded. And that is why it matters. True kindness comes from the heart, not from knowing the story first. Mark felt a warmth in his chest. Something in her tone made him feel seen, appreciated in a way he hadn't expected. Tala shifted slightly, her strength now more visible. When I woke up and saw you, I felt safe. Not because I understood everything, but because something deep inside me recognized the kindness in your presence. Mark's eyes softened. I'm glad you felt that. You asked why I stayed near you when I first woke, she continued gently. It was because I needed clarity. Seeing your face reminded me of my father's stories, and I felt the calm that comes when life places you where you are meant to be. Her words lingered in the air. The desert outside hummed faintly through the open window. A breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of sagebrush. The world seemed peaceful, as if it too understood the meaning of this moment. So now you know what led me into the desert. Engie up here left me, speechless. Mark smiled slightly. I understand more than I did before, and I'm glad you shared it with me. The room settled into a calm silence, full of unspoken understanding. Tala rested her hands over her heart. Sometimes, life circles back to remind us we are not alone, she said softly. Your grandfather helped my father. You helped me, and maybe now, I can find the peace I was searching for. Mark felt the quiet weight of her words. Something inside him whispered that their meeting was no accident. It was part of a story that had started long before either of them realized. And as the morning sunlight warmed the small cabin, Mark understood that the bond between them, shaped by the past, strengthened in the present, was only beginning to unfold. The late morning sun warmed the small cabin, painting soft lines of light across the wooden floor. Tala seemed much stronger now. Her breathing was steady, her eyes clearer than earlier. The story she had shared sounded like a bridge between 2 times the past of her father and the present she now found herself in. Mark sat across from her, trying to absorb everything she had told him. He felt as if a circle had quietly closed around them, connecting his grandfather and her father in a way he never imagined. Tala closed her eyes for a moment, taking a slow breath. It was clear she had carried her story for a long time, and sharing it had eased a burden she didn't fully understand until now. When she opened her eyes again, They held a peaceful softness. "I think I understand what I need to do now," she said gently. Mark leaned forward slightly. "What is that?" Tala looked toward the window, where the desert stretched far and wide, sparkling in the sunlight. "I need to return home," she said. "I need to speak with the others and share what I learned. I know now what my father wanted me to see." Her words carried a quiet certainty, as if a thought that once felt heavy now made sense. Mark felt a gentle mix of relief and sadness. He knew she needed to go back, but a part of him wished their time together didn't have to end so soon. "I can drive you," Mark said immediately. "You shouldn't walk all that way." Tala smiled warmly. "Thank you. I would appreciate that." Her calm voice made the moment feel delicate, almost sacred. Mark stood up and began gathering his things, keys, a few bottles of water, and a light blanket in case she still felt weak during the ride. Tala rose slowly from the bed, steady on her feet but still moving with care. "You sure you're okay to travel?" Mark asked, with concern. "Yes," she replied. "The desert taught me something yesterday, and waking here gave me the rest." They stepped outside, and the warm air greeted them gently. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that made the world look bigger than it actually was. Mark helped Tala into the truck and made sure she was comfortable before starting the engine. As the truck moved down the dirt road, Tala looked out the window, her expression peaceful, thoughtful, almost meditative. After a few minutes of quiet driving, Tala spoke softly. "Do you know what my father used to say about the desert?" Mark shook his head. "What did he say?" He said the desert is not empty. It is full of lessons. It teaches patience, strength, and respect. And when you listen carefully, it shows you the truth you've been avoiding." Mark smiled. "Sounds like your father was very wise." She nodded slowly. He was. The drive took them farther across the open land. The rocks, sand, and tall grasses looked peaceful under the bright sun. After a while, Tala turned to him. "You helped me," she said. "But you didn't only help me survive the night. You gave me a reminder of something important." "What's that?" Mark asked. "That kindness still exists," she said, "and that sometimes people appear in your life exactly when they are meant to." Her words stayed with him. They felt simple but carried a deep truth. After nearly an hour of driving, they reached the edge of Tala's community, a small area filled with traditional homes, open spaces, and people who valued the land as much as life itself. As they approached, a few people noticed the truck and came forward, concern visible on their faces. Tala waved gently to them, signaling she was all right. Mark parked the truck and stepped out. Tala did the same, standing with quiet confidence. A woman who looked a few years older than Tala approached first. "Tala," she said breathlessly, "we were worried. You didn't return last night." "I'm all right," Tala reassured her. "I just needed time to think." The woman nodded, relief washing over her face. Then she turned to Mark, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for bringing her back." Mark felt a warm respect in her tone. "I'm glad I could help." Tala gently touched the woman's arm. "I need to speak with the elders," she said. "Will you let them know?" The woman nodded and walked off, heading toward a nearby building. Tala turned back to Mark. "This is where we part," she said softly. Mark felt a tug inside his chest, the kind that comes when a moment feels meaningful and you don't want it to end too quickly. "I'm glad you're safe," he said, "and I'm glad I was there." Tala smiled. The kind of smile that felt both grateful and timeless. "There is something I want you to have," she said. She reached into the small cloth pouch she carried and pulled out a tiny bead, bright blue, smooth, and beautifully shaped. It caught the light like a drop of clear sky. "This belongs to a set my father made," she said. "He believed blue beads carried peace and clarity." I want you to keep it, so you remember that our meeting had purpose." Mark took the bead carefully, feeling its smooth surface. "Thank you," he said softly. "This means a lot." Tala nodded. "And when you return to your cabin, look at the land differently. There are stories around you, even if you don't see them at first." "I will," Mark promised. She stepped back slowly, her eyes warm and steady. "I'd like that," Mark said. "Very much." Tala gave him one last peaceful smile before turning and walking toward her people. She moved with quiet confidence now, as if the weight she carried yesterday had finally lifted. Mark watched her for a moment, then slowly walked back to his truck. As he drove away, he felt something inside him shift, a gentle understanding that life sometimes places strangers together for reasons bigger than either of them can see in the moment. Later that evening, Mark returned to his cabin. The desert had begun to cool, and the sky was turning soft shades of purple and silver. He stood outside for a long time, watching the horizon. The land looked the same as before, still, endless, peaceful, but something felt different. He reached into his pocket and held the blue bead Tala had given him. It felt warm, as if it carried a small piece of the desert's spirit. He remembered Tala's words. Kindness repeats itself across generations. As he looked at the quiet land around him, he understood that their meeting wasn't random. It was woven from something older, something meaningful, something gentle. He went inside and sat at his small table. For a moment, he closed his eyes and thought of his grandfather, a man he admired deeply, whose kindness had touched someone he never met. And now, years later, that kindness had found its way back through Tala. The thought brought a peaceful warmth to Mark's heart. A few days later, Mark decided to visit Tala's community again, not to ask questions, and not to seek anything, but simply to show respect, just as his grandfather once had. When he arrived, Tala greeted him with a calm smile and led him through her village. She showed him the beadwork she created, delicate patterns and colors that told stories of family, tradition, and the land. Mark watched her hands move with grace, weaving beauty into each thread. He felt honored to witness a part of her world, something meaningful and alive. As the days passed, Mark realized the desert had given him more than photographs. It had given him connection to history, to people, to kindness, and to destiny. His life felt richer, as if a new chapter had opened. And every time he looked at the blue bead on his desk, he remembered the day he found a woman in the desert, and how that simple act brought two lives together in a way neither of them had expected. It reminded him that sometimes the smallest moments carry the deepest meaning, and it reminded him that kindness once planted always finds its way back.